Thank you. Should we go ahead? Yeah, okay. Welcome everyone to ICE and Policing in Windham County. I'm Kate Prelberg-Quam. I'm the Executive Director of the Community Asylum Seekers Project in Brattleboro, which is a small nonprofit whose mission is to provide basic needs and a supportive community to people in the process of seeking asylum in the United States. We are happy to co-host this workshop with Migrant Justice and the No Mas Polimigra campaign of Windham County, both of which you will be hearing about shortly. Just to begin, for anybody who hasn't been spending 80% of the last 8 months on Zoom, I wanted to give a little review of Zoom etiquette. First of all, if you see at the bottom of your screen, the bottom left is a mute button. That is also used to unmute. So when you want to speak or when you don't want people to hear, whatever's going on in your house, please avail yourself of that button. Second thing is if you go to where your picture is, or your name if you don't have your video on, and you hover over those 3 dots, you'll see that you can rename yourself. If you care to include your gender pronouns, please feel welcome to rename yourself with your gender pronouns. What else? In addition to recording, it's incumbent upon me to tell you that Zoom is not entirely encrypted, and we're going to be talking about the government, so take that as you will. Thirdly, also down in the middle of your screen, right at the bottom, you can see the chat function. It's a little speech bubble. If you click that, you'll see the chat window appear on the right-hand side of your screen. When we are in screen sharing mode and you want to see the chat, it'll come up as a window in front of the screen that you're looking at, and you can click and drag it off to the side. You're welcome to use the chat during this entire workshop for side conversations, comments, questions. We may or may not see what you post until we're gonna have about a half an hour at the end of discussion. And during that time, Jessa, you wanna wave Jessa? That's Jessa, she's next to me in my screen. Jessa's gonna be monitoring the chat and calling on folks with questions. So at that point, you can type your name in the chat and Jessa will call on you. So let me turn over this portion to Mark Tully of the No Mas Polimigra campaign to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing in Windham County.
Yeah, I just found unmute. Hi everyone, I'm Mark. The No Mas Polimigra campaign is a project of Migrant Justice here in Vermont. And the point of the campaign is to block local police authorities from communicating and cooperating with federal immigration authorities. It is a campaign that's being run mostly town by town, and in our case, Windham County. So every police authority has a fair and impartial policing policy. And the No Mas Polimigra campaign seeks to change those policies in these 5 ways. Now, Migrant Justice has very specific wording for each of these to insert into the policies. So it's a very direct campaign. Obviously, that all couldn't fit on this, so I paraphrased them. No discrimination in detention discretion. Police have a lot of discretion about when to arrest or detain people. What this one says is that personal characteristics and immigration status cannot be used as an excuse to exercise that discretion to detain or arrest. The second one, if any victims or witnesses to crimes come forward, any information about their immigration status cannot be shared, and we want that specifically spelled out in the policy. The third one listed here is very broad. No matter who they're dealing with, they just don't talk to immigration authorities about that person. There is a a very specific exception involving a particular kind of felony. And if you get involved with the campaign, you will see the full version of all of these, but in general, it blocks information sharing about anyone. The fourth one listed here is specific to folks who are in police custody or in detention. This one blocks police from allowing immigration authorities access to that person, and that can be coming in to interrogate them or coming to take them away, which is an unfortunately common practice. So if they have somebody in detention and they know their immigration status, that is also a specific ban on information sharing. And the last one listed here is there's this loophole where if police suspect somebody has crossed the border illegally, and how broad is that, they can communicate with immigration authorities, and that happens. And so this one is specifically to ban that. So that's the rundown of the 5 changes to the FIT policies. In Vermont, these are the towns that have successfully gotten these changes. As of the time I made this slide anyway, there may be an additional one, but Winooski, Burlington, Hartford, and Norwich have successfully run this campaign. And as you see on the bottom, these are all the places that currently have active campaigns, including us. In the Windham County campaign, our main focuses right now are the Windham County Sheriff and the Brattleboro Police Department. Those are the 2 that we are starting with. The follow-up to this session will have all sorts of information on how you can connect to this campaign. And you can ask questions about it later if you wish. And yeah, that's the quickie version. So that's the No Mas Polimigra campaign, and you might hear more about it from folks from Migrant Justice as the night goes on. Check.
Thank you, Mark. So what we thought about doing in order to sort of bring together all the various issues that we're talking about here in order to keep our neighbors in Windham County safe and secure, all of them, all of us. There is a recent Netflix documentary called Immigration Nation, which some folks may have seen. And there are 3 clips from that documentary that demonstrate a local struggle to keep ICE from collaborating with a county sheriff. And so we're going to stream some clips from that, and then we will have Migrant Justice introduce our guest speaker, and following that we'll have sort of an open panel discussion about ICE and policing in Windham County. So Jessa, do you want to take over screen sharing?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, I'm running a name right now.
What we got?
No movement yet. The 2 vehicles both belonging to the individual, so hopefully they go to work at some point.
Even though they're not legally allowed to work, they're working. We know that. You know, they have to. They do what they do to survive. You know, that's why they drive. They're not allowed to drive, but they drive anyway. And the more they do, the more they put themselves out there. If people stayed home, you know, they probably wouldn't be encountered all that much, but you gotta live. It is what it is. Tango? No.
You got his ID? Yeah.
Su nombre es Brian, ¿sí?
Sí.
Desde Honduras.
Sí.
¿Qué tipo de trabajo haces?
Construcción. Please, please let me go.
He was arrested by Border Patrol at the border. Ha sido arrestado por la policía aquí en los Estados Unidos. Nunca, por nada. That's his child's birth certificate. I want you to know that he has a child here.
We're gonna check your fingerprints, okay? Here. All right.
Yep,
Hold on, hold
I
this.
got you.
See your right hand here. So,
Technology at its best.
Where it gets sensitive is when the kids are involved. I'm a dad and I have a grandchild, and it's tough when the kids are involved. Nobody wants to see children hurt. Sometimes it happens. It's not very nice, but that's the law.
Bad timing for that dude to be coming out.
Oh, you did the right thing though. You had to make contact. Collateral damage there, man. Even under the Obama administration, when we had the priorities, that really didn't limit anything. What people didn't realize is there was this little I call it the fine print at the bottom that said you can arrest anybody you basically want to. You know, if you think they present a threat to the United States or could possibly present a threat, and we did. It's so easy to say, oh, you got arrested, boom. You're a threat to public safety. Doesn't matter what for. There's millions of people to choose from.
Every person that commits additional crimes here in the United States after entering illegally, every one of them we take off the streets makes everyone safer. Here in Charlotte, we were able to do a lot of our enforcement work inside the jail with our local law enforcement partners.
Everyone that is brought into our arrest processing, which is last year over 35,000 people, they're asked the same two questions, every single person. Where were you born? Were you a citizen or national of? Depending on how they answer those questions is whether they're going to enter into the 287G program.
Thousands of jails across the country. ICE can't have officers at every jail all the time. We have limited resources. We're not there all the time. If you're a 287G program, hey, you get arrested, local deputies right there. Run the checks, find out who that person is. So it's faster and people don't slip through the cracks. So essentially, it's a force multiplier.
So a person's brought in for, let's say, DWI. There's no ID on them. We don't know who they are. They're ran through this federal database. So if we do not have this program, they will be released back out in the community once they satisfy their state charges. But because we have the program, ICE comes in. And at that time, ICE makes the decision whether they are removed from this community or they're not. Most likely they will be removed from this community because they're here illegally.
You know, the fundamental premise of law enforcement is that federal, state, and local work together, collaboratively.
And why it's a big issue in Mecklenburg County, we've been doing this for 12 years. Just right now, it's an election.
The sheriff's a really good guy too. Just, you know, sheriff's an elected official in North Carolina, obviously, and he's got to do what the voters want.
So the sheriff, who's currently in office right now, he supports a few programs that are a little problematic. So in terms, I'm Latino, so like for me, and I'm an immigrant, so for me, one of the biggest issues is that he's partnering with immigration and customs enforcement to basically to deputize the sheriffs and place people into deportation proceedings if they come in contact with the jail, and that could be something as little as a traffic citation, driving without a license. And so we're really trying to make sure that people know that on May 8th, you can go out to vote, and you can vote for our community. Yeah. pero estamos tratando de empujar que la gente vaya a votar por Gary McFadden, porque él se ha comprometido a terminar el programa. Así que si pueden salir un poquito más de latinos, exactamente, una gran diferencia.
I wish I could.
I know, I wish I could vote too, I can't vote. So I'm trying to motivate people who can't vote to vote for issues that will affect people like me, people who like no tienen, you know, who are affected by these policies. But tell everybody you know, if they live in Mecklenburg County, it matters so much right now because we have a possibility of getting rid of the program.
5 segundos. Hi. Please, McFadden, we want to do something.
Sure.
I, Gary McFadden, promise that I will burn the 287 if I got elected. Lo prometo. Yo, Gary McFadden, promete que él quemará la 287G y quiero que firme para la voz del inmigrante. You're going to see.
Burn.
Dale, fírmame aquí.
We're just leaving the literature. We're just leaving the literature, and we left one on your door. Thank you, ma'am.
I've worked in homicide for 22 years. 287G has hindered my investigations. Why? Witnesses don't want to come forward. Even the victims don't want to come forward. They are reluctant to talk to us. People won't even name the suspect because they're afraid they will also be deported. People approach me, and one thing stood out more than anything else was that fear. The fear of being deported. The fear of, coming home and your father is gone. Do I understand that? Yes. In the African American community, we have that fear of being shot and killed by law enforcement. So when the people are talking about these fears and uneasiness, I can relate to that.
Tango or no? No?
That's not him. But that's not our guy at all.
Ron?
Yep.
Ask him where he's from.
The driver?
Yeah.
Evidently, you both at stop sign on the way out.
He's checking him out. I just want to know where is he, what country?
He's saying the United States.
Is he?
Yeah.
Where are you from?
California.
He's a USC, let's let him go quickly. All right, sorry about the inconvenience. I really am, okay? Okay. Take care of yourself. All right, we're out. Regardless of this election, we're not going to stop doing what we do. I understand it's not the most popular thing in the world. We're going to continue to do what we do until somebody stops us from doing it.
Hey, how are you?
How are ya? So we're out here today trying to inform people that there's a sheriff's primary going on.
So what's the no to
287G?
Yeah. The current sheriff has signed an agreement with ICE. It's responsible for over 15,000 removals of individuals.
Yes. First generation immigrants, this is like one of our key issues for us because our families are affected, our friends are affected, and it's tough to live in fear constantly, right? So, yeah.
It's been a melting pot over here. Mm-hmm. So, we know lots of people who have these issues.
Yeah.
So,
a lot of my friends who I grew up with lost family members due to 287G. There was lots of ICE activity in our city. And I was the only person with a driver's license in my neighborhood that could go pick up people who had their children who were stuck at an ID check. And so I was there and got to witness people with their families on a two-way road getting put into sheriff's office vans. I was given people's cars with their children and told, please take them home. So I saw the risk and the fear. We decided that we had to do something. We couldn't stay still. We took a moment to realize, what should we really focus on and what was at stake. And we noticed that the 287G program was something that it was here locally and we had the power to do something about, especially because we knew the elections were coming.
The race for Mecklenburg County Sheriff is quickly becoming a referendum on the controversial 287G program.
I understand earlier this week your county commissioners meeting debated this program. How frustrating is that for you?
Well, we've heard from city council, county commissioners, folks running for office, that they do not support this program. This program is about safety and security of our county.
I saw the national news.
It truly is a referendum.
The immigrant community here has been very vocal. They make it known who they like, and they make it known who they dislike. They are tired, and they are letting their voice be heard here. It's a factor. It's a factor.
The current administration has publicly stated that one of its priorities is an expansion of 287G. Obviously, local elections are for local people to decide, but our role is to say, all right, sheriff, whomever you may be, if you are under the impression that not cooperating with ICE will somehow result in less immigration enforcement in your community, just be aware that's not true. ICE will then have no choice but to send more officers into your community. But, those jurisdictions are going to make their own decisions.
Strengthening the social fabric. To what I'm doing, and I am in charge.
Hey, Cundy, did you read Forsyth's canceling us?
The sheriff of Forsyth County says his jail will no longer allow U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement to house detainees there. The sheriff says his office will never be an extension of Immigration Services.
ICE got mad. And what are they doing? They're terrorizing us. They're going everywhere we go, they're there. Because they want to intimidate us. Because we voted to kick them out of Charlotte. We will not be intimidated by ICE today or tomorrow or never.
ICE is partially blaming Mecklenburg County Sheriff Gary McFadden for the increased enforcement.
Brian Cox mentioned that if I did take this off the books, this will cause more aggressive activity.
This is a sheriff who ran on ICE is bad. And so day one in office, suspended all cooperation. So Mecklenburg County's policies have shut out ICE. In today's world, with more jurisdictions refusing to cooperate with us, it has forced us to really get creative and rethink how are we going to do this.
Sheriffs of Lake and Durham counties announced they will not take part in ICE operations.
Sheriffs in North Carolina are tight. Once the wind blows, man, it seems like everyone follows suit.
And remember, if you stand against us, we vote you out.
Hey, how you doing, man? Good to see you. Just another quiet day in the RO, right?
They almost had to force print somebody this morning.
Oh, you don't have the right.
You can't take my fingerprints.
I don't give you consent to handcuff me and place me under arrest. So what are we up to for the week now? We're at what?
149.
That's including today?
Not today.
So I'm Brian Cox with ICE, Public Affairs Officer. Anything of the sort that these activist groups say that we are doing, and in fact, they are spreading misinformation. Look, these are not speeding, driving without a license. These are people arrested locally on serious violent felony charges. So we don't have official data, but I'm sure you've seen it. I mean, due to the media firestorm this week, and there's so much misinformation. All right, bye. I made clear to the reporter, look, you take these little hyperbolic stories out of context. Let me just give you our stats that 91% of everybody we arrested last year had a conviction or an arrest. Like, we're not doing any kind of thing
We're
indiscriminate.
Right now, I think according to the unofficial stats, right now we're at about a third crim. That's what headquarters pulled this morning.
We're planning to hold a brief news conference tomorrow, Friday, 10:30 a.m., where we'll provide preliminary stats for the week and also discuss the arrests. That's vague enough. The same stuff that I've been giving up until now, about 90%. We don't do any kind of indiscriminate enforcement. The field office arrest stats, that 91% crim or criminal arrest.
You're not going to have that today.
I've got that.
No, I mean for this op.
Oh, the local stats. Yeah, I know. We're not going to have.
I mean for this op. I mean, I think we're about 35%.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, just own it. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we got non-criminals on this one, but it's because of the way we were forced to do the arrests. I think what you said. Look, this isn't a one-off. This is the new normal. Due to these policies, we told you what you didn't believe us. You thought we were bluffing, whatnot. Like, no. And the whole goal here is to get them to change their policy, put it back on them, so they go to the sheriff and say, okay, what are you going to do?
We have requested to receive an update from the Mecklenburg County Sheriff regarding the status of U.S. immigration and custom enforcement activities in Mecklenburg County.
First of all, the stats about undocumented immigration making the rise of violent crimes is not true. Let me be clear. My focus is public safety and is strengthening the social fabric of our community rather than tear apart families. That's the work truly before us.
We elected you to be the chief law enforcement officer in this county. ICE didn't appoint you. The president didn't appoint you. It's outrageous that these federal employees are making any comments about how you are performing your job, the job we elected you to do. I believe it is totally out of order for a federal agency to come in our community and to instill fear. We support you.
All right. Thank you, Jessa. Welcome. Whew. Yeah, and if folks were not following the chat, if you want to view the entire Netflix series, I believe you can get a free 1-week trial, and it's about a 6-hour series called Immigration Nation. Came out earlier this year, just in time for quarantine. Will, are you ready with Olga to introduce? That's great. You can go ahead, and then we'll keep in mind whatever you want to discuss about the film clips that you saw. We're going to discuss everything kind of all together after our speaker concludes.
Excellent. Good evening, everybody. My name is Will Lambeck. I'm a part of the staff team at the organization Migrant Justice and Justicia Migrante. Excuse me. I will be interpreting for a member of the Migrant Justice Farmworker Coordinating Committee, Olga Cruz, and I'll pass it over to her right now. She'll provide some remarks in Spanish, and I'll be interpreting them into English. Buenas noches, Olga. Te acabo de presentar el grupo. Y sí, dale. Tiene como 10 minutos y 20 con la interpretación, y luego habrán las preguntas.
Hola, mucho gusto. Mi nombre es Olga Cruz. Soy de Chiapas, México. Estoy viviendo en Vermont ahora. Y soy una ordeñadora en una granja lechera y también parte del Comité de Coordinación de Justicia Migrante.
Hello, good evening. My name is Olga Cruz. I'm an immigrant from Chiapas, Mexico, and I'm a milker on a dairy farm in Vermont, and I've been here the last 10 years.
Bueno, soy uno de muchos inmigrantes que estamos aquí en Vermont. Somos creo que 1,200 a 1,500 inmigrantes trabajando todo el año, no por temporada. Somos gente de México y Centroamérica, más familia ahora que antes, que sostenemos la industria lechera en los ranchos.
So I'm one of many. Oh, perdón, dale.
Y vivimos en los ranchos.
I'm one of many immigrants living here in the state of Vermont. By our count, there are between 1,200 and 1,500 immigrant workers working in the dairy industry in the state. And those are people working year round. It's not seasonal work. We're here all around the year. Mostly we're from Mexico and some from Central America. And increasingly over the years, we're families. We're having and raising children here in the state. And it's also important to say that for most of us, we live on the farms where we work.
Ahora yo estoy en un rancho que está bajo el programa. Las condiciones ahora son mejores porque estoy bajo el programa de leche con dignidad. Mi salario es mejor, mi vivienda está mejorando y ha mejorado bastante, pero pues eso yo porque estoy bajo el programa, pero muchos siguen viviendo pues lo que se vivía antes y de que a veces hay discriminaciones en los ranchos, también como les dan una paga muy injusta, como que no les pagan lo que deberían pagarles y también las condiciones de viviendas no son muy buenas y aparte se sufre a veces discriminaciones en los ranchos.
So I'm working on a dairy farm that is enrolled in Migrant Justice's Milk with Dignity program. And because of that, I have conditions in my farm that are better than what other people experience. My salary is higher, my housing situation has improved a lot, it's still improving. But that's because I'm enrolled in this program, my farm is enrolled in this program. But there are others who are living and working in the same conditions as before. So they're experiencing discrimination on their farms. There's unjust pay. They aren't getting paid a fair amount, a fair wage for the work they're doing, and are having to suffer from really poor housing conditions.
Las condiciones que tenemos con la migra pues son muy malas. La comunidad no tiene documentos porque no hay manera de sacar una visa más porque a veces no tenemos la oportunidad de sacar una visa, a veces por dinero o por ciertas cosas que prefiero no mencionar, pero es un poco difícil y siempre estamos viviendo con ese miedo a ser detenido porque todo el tiempo se oye de que están amenazando, de que va a haber redadas y es todo el tiempo, uno vive con eso y pues es mucho el riesgo que se corre pues para ser arrestados si salimos de los ranchos.
So the situation, apart from the farms, the situation with immigration enforcement in the state is really bad. As a community, we don't have documents. We're an undocumented community, and that's because there's no way for us to get a visa. We just don't have that opportunity because to get a visa, you need money, you need other sorts of qualifications that we don't have. So it's a difficult life because we're living with the fear of always running the risk of being detained. We hear about arrests all the time, threats of arrests and raids, and you live constantly in that fear because every time you're leaving your farm and your house, you're running the risk that you're going to be arrested.
Hace 10 años que la comunidad migrante se empezó a organizar y se formó la organización Justicia Migrante. Juntamos a toda la comunidad para luchar por nuestros derechos. Hemos ganado muchas cosas como las licencias, hemos ganado como el Polimigra, pero necesitamos reforzar las leyes porque pues se han visto casos donde nosotros creemos que eso está como bien débil y necesitamos reforzarlo. Hemos ganado también recientemente ganamos los 5 millones pues para la campaña COVID y pues porque nosotros fuimos excluidos de aquella ayuda que el gobierno ha dado y también tenemos leche con dignidad, para transformar las condiciones en los ranchos y asegurar que cumplan con nuestros derechos humanos.
And so about 10 years ago, facing these conditions, the community started to organize and founded Migrant Justice. And Migrant Justice is an organization that brings the community together to fight for our human rights. And over the years, we've won a lot. We've made a lot of progress. So we won a campaign to gain access to driver's licenses. We have created the fair and impartial policing policies, or the Polimigra policies, and we need to strengthen those laws, and we'll be talking about that because we've seen lots of cases where that policy is weak and needs to be strengthened. More recently, we won our COVID Relief Fund campaign to create a $5 million fund in Vermont for people who were excluded from government aid during the pandemic. And we have also won the Milk with Dignity campaign, as I mentioned, to transform the conditions on dairy farms in the state.
Polimigra es lo que nosotros, bueno, hemos ganado según Polimigra, pero pues estamos también aquí, es otro motivo como para parar la discriminación de la policía. Hay casos donde vemos que han sido detenidos compas y que se ha visto involucrado la migración. Hay una política estatal supuestamente parar esta colaboración, pero es demasiado débil, necesitamos reforzarlo para nosotros sentirnos seguros. Como sabemos que existe, pero la verdad que hay muchos policías o pueblos que todavía no respetan esa ley.
So with the issue of Polimigra, or the collaboration between police and immigration authorities, we started this campaign years ago to stop police discrimination against immigrants, because there are many cases where an immigrant community member is stopped or detained by local police, and then they involve ICE or Border Patrol, and that person ends up being deported. And so we've passed a state law and state policy to stop that. But right now, that policy has been weakened, and it needs to be strengthened so that we can feel safe, because there are too many cops out there. There are too many police agencies in towns that are continuing to collaborate with immigration.
Hemos organizado para fortalecer la política en muchos pueblos y poner un muro entre la policía y la migra. Ahora existe en pueblos como Burlington, Winooski, Hartford y más. Queremos que el condado de Windham se involucre en la lucha y se solidarice con la comunidad inmigrante en la lucha por nuestros derechos humanos.
So we've organized town by town and county by county to strengthen this policy, and have been effective in passing policies that truly build a wall between police and immigration enforcement. And so we've won policies in Burlington and Winooski and Hartford and elsewhere. And we're talking with you tonight because we want Windham County to be part of this struggle as well, and to have the county be in solidarity with the immigrant community.
Pues ojalá que tomen en cuenta esto, pues que se está diciendo. Yo estoy aquí pues pero estoy representando a mi comunidad, que a veces también como les da miedo para hablar también, o por miedo a represalias también. Es muy importante que nos tomen en cuenta. Es algo que es un derecho que nos pertenece, pero que no todos lo quieren y pueden ver quizás. A lo mejor, si ustedes ven y deciden, pues, para nosotros será bien importante. Pues estamos logrando en varios pueblos, y ojalá que de pronto todo Vermont esté así, para donde quiera que vayamos nos sintamos seguros.
So we hope that you listen to tonight and hear our words. I'm here not just representing myself, but representing my community. And oftentimes people in our community are scared to speak up because we're worried about retaliation. But it's important to have our voices heard and for people to pay attention, because everybody has rights as human beings, but not everybody wants us to be able to exercise those rights. So if you're listening to me tonight and you think that this issue is important, we hope that you'll work with us to help expand this campaign and bring this policy to Windham County.
Eso es todo. Muchas gracias.
That's all. Thank you very much.
Olga, muchísimas gracias a usted por dar su tiempo, este esfuerzo, y pues les agradecemos mucho.
Gracias.
And thanks to Will too for interpretation. Yeah, so we have a couple of sort of backup discussion questions for folks to think about how what you saw in the documentary relates to what Olga is talking about, and how it might manifest in Windham County. But I first want to just open up for anybody who has a question or a comment or something that they thought about while watching and listening, to go ahead and put your name in the chat, and Jessa will monitor and call on you. And when you speak, maybe you could introduce yourself to us as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessa. I'm here with CASP this evening. It's good to see you. Thank you, Olga. That was great. So, Anne, it looks like you have a question. Do you want to unmute yourself and you can ask and direct it as you would like?
Yeah, whoops. Yeah, what I actually, it's a comment. I just attended an ACLU workshop. Can people hear me okay? I wasn't sure how this works. Okay. Yeah, I just attended an ACLU workshop, and Jay Diaz, one of the lawyers, mentioned that on December 10th, there's a case that they're doing in the Vermont Supreme Court. And this case is challenging the Border Patrol's spread in northern Vermont. And he encouraged us to attend this. Now, I don't know how that happens, how we could actually show up. But that seems like an important issue, because they're coming all the way down 100 miles into the state, which is pretty much the whole state. And the Border Patrol is not supposed to be doing this. So this is unconstitutional. And our Vermont ACLU is challenging. And I just want to let everybody know about that.
That's great.
And maybe we can find out some information about how to get involved in that case. And when we send a follow-up email with resources, we can include that.
Great. Francie, do you have a question?
I do. So I was aware, geez, it's hard for me to remember now exactly when, but of the Hannaford campaign around Milk with Dignity and supporting that program. And I'm wondering where that stands.
Olga, la pregunta es acerca de la campaña Hannaford y qué está pasando con Hannaford y dónde está la campaña ahora.
Pues nosotros ya hemos intentado hablar con ellos, no hemos recibido respuesta, pero no nos damos por vencida. Aquí seguimos y aquí seguiremos luchando por nuestros derechos. Yo ya estoy en el programa, pero pues lo que deseamos es que todos los inmigrantes estén bajo el programa para, pues, no darnos un lujo, pero es algo que realmente se necesita en la vida diaria. No hemos recibido respuestas, nos han ignorado, pero pues aquí seguiremos.
So yeah, we've tried talking with Hannafords. They haven't responded yet, but we're not giving up. We're going to keep fighting for our rights because we're here and we're not going anywhere. So as I said, I'm in the program, but we want everybody to be able to be included and have what I have, because it's not a luxury that we're fighting for. It's just basic rights. And we think it's important for Hannaford to accept that.
Thank you.
It looks like Linda has a question about, Linda, would you like to ask your question? Or I can read it out. Linda's asking, Vermont prohibits local authorities cooperating with ICE, but many local authorities do so anyway. Is that what's happening?
Linda, you're muted, I think. Right down at the bottom of your screen, there's a microphone button.
Mark is gone. I think it must not be working properly.
There you go. Now we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted the clarification. It wasn't clear to me that state law prohibits the cooperation, but local authorities are just doing it anyway, and therefore, what is being sought is clarification of the law so that local authorities can't kind of wiggle around. Is that right?
I can feel that. There's been a number of different versions of Vermont's fair and impartial policing policy. In 2016, we had passed and implemented a very strong policy, the strongest in the country, prohibiting nearly all forms of communication and collaboration between local law enforcement and ICE and Border Patrol. But when Trump came into office in 2017 and started making threats against sanctuary cities and threatening to withhold funding and all that sort of thing, at the Attorney General's recommendation, TJ Donovan, Vermont weakened its policy and at the Trump administration's request added in new loopholes allowing for ongoing communication. And so that's allowed Vermont police to continue collaborating and turning people over to ICE and Border Patrol. So that watered down statewide policy is in effect in most places around the state, but several jurisdictions like Burlington and Winooski and Hartford and Norwich and the Addison County Sheriff's Department have strengthened that policy and have closed those loopholes. And that's what we're advocating for at the local level around the state.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. John Fields, you have a question.
Hi, just kind of piggybacking on that last one. In your experience, when resolutions are passed in local communities to prevent collaboration, does law enforcement comply with that?
Well, I don't know if that's something that you can answer.
Yeah, we generally have seen them be effective. We haven't seen any cases of collaboration in any of the jurisdictions that have passed the strengthened policies. We should say that with the current statewide model policy, this current one that's riddled with loopholes, it still does contain some protections. And so on our reading of the policy, we think that departments are violating it at certain times when they are collaborating. And so Migrant Justice over the years has supported people in filing discrimination claims with the Vermont Human Rights Commission when we believe there have been violations of the fair and impartial policing policy, and people have been successful in getting rulings of discrimination and having the police departments have to pay out settlements. And there are a couple cases pending right now as well. The problem is the result of that sort of harmful collaboration is that people are deported. And so it's very difficult to defend your rights and gain redress when you've already been deported.
Thank you. Bob Oser.
Sometimes my audio is not the best, so can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. So actually I had that question that I put in the chat, and when Will was speaking, I thought of something else. But when I looked at the Winooski policy, it seems to start off with a disclaimer. I don't want to misquote it, but something about it doesn't create any rights or it doesn't create any claims or cause for claims. Does anyone know like how that line got into the Winooski policy, and is that a problem? And then either a follow-up or an alternate question, since TJ Donovan was somewhat responsible for weakening the stronger policy, would a campaign to reach out to TJ be in order?
I'll take a look at the policy, Bob. I don't know which the disclaimer language off the top of my head, but during the course of the call, I'll look at it and maybe I'll circle back to that at the end. I just don't want to speak off the cuff on that. In terms of TJ, absolutely, we would encourage anybody to reach out to him and say that you can't both claim to be a progressive reformer and also allow law enforcement in the state of Vermont to continue to turn people over to ICE and Border Patrol to be deported and separated from their families. Those two things can't coexist. And the sort of cruel irony of his position is that the Attorney General's office has entered into cases in other jurisdictions supporting lawsuits in California, for example, when California is defending policies that are very similar to what we're advocating for here. So they're sort of saying to other jurisdictions, yeah, go for it, we got your back. But when it comes to taking action here in the state and putting grant dollars for Vermont police at risk, they've been pretty gun shy on that.
It looks like.
Do you want to just skip just a second to Anne, who has something on this particular topic, and then I'd love to hear from Shay too.
Yes. So Anne is going to read us the Winooski disclaimer.
Yeah, I've been working on this stuff for 3 years, like Will and a lot of other folks. And what the Winooski disclaimer says, the Winooski Police Department has adopted additional components. Nothing in this Winooski Police Department fair and impartial policing policy is intended to violate federal law. Now, what happened in December of 2017 when the policy was changed? Because of the Trump administration, 8 mentions of 8 USC 1373 and 1744, a lot of legalese, were added to the FIP. And now the Winooski policy takes them out and just covers it like this. Instead of all this mumbo jumbo, they just say nothing is intended to violate federal law.
Thanks, Anne.
Bob, does that clear things up for your question?
So having looked at the Brattleboro Police Department policy, that policy seems to follow what Winooski's policy used to be. There are maybe a half dozen mentions to the federal statute. So I gather the idea is to take out the specific references to the statute and have a broad disclaimer that this doesn't violate federal law.
Thank you. Shay, did you want to talk about the Brattleboro Community Safety Review?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
My internet is pretty bad, so I might have to put it in the chat. To be visible. My name is Shay, and I'm one of the facilitators of the Brattleboro Community Safety Review Project. It's a project that started this spring after the uprisings around police violence. Activists pushed the select board to consider what would keep all of our community safe. There was a long back and forth about what that process would look like, and now it's a facilitated committee of the Brattleboro Select Board, and we're going to put a report and recommendations to the Select Board at the end of this calendar year about policing, DCF interventions, mental health interventions, and community safety. And so in the chat, I can put some ways to put your voice into that process if folks want to share about this or other concerns about policing in Brattleboro specifically, Brattleboro area residents. Because of how small Windham County is, I think many people in Windham County would count, but we have an anonymous survey that any community member can fill out about their own experiences or their perspectives about what would need to change to make things feel safer in the community. We have that survey in Spanish, We have a survey for people who work in community safety or community support organizations, and we have lots of other ways to get a hold of us. So I'll share some info in the chat, but I think they're parallel projects at least, and if there are ways that folks can, that's just a forum where the Select Board of Brattleboro at least, and potentially the police, are going to be already listening to some community feedback pretty intensely during this cycle before the next budget. So it might be a space where folks want to share.
Shay, does this committee is this taking the place of the committee that was sort of attached to the select board? Do you know what I'm talking about? That was like the review of things like if you had a complaint.
The CPCC is different, and we're also doing like an in-depth review of the police department's policies and procedures and making a report about that. And that will also include a report about the accountability mechanisms that the police have, including the CPCC. So we're not connected with them other than we're going to be reviewing that as part of our work. And talking with them, the CPCC themselves, about what their perspective is about the efficacy of that structure for police accountability.
Can you describe the define the CPCC? Like, what
I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but it's like the Citizen Police. Bob Ozier might know what the acronym stands for. It's the Citizen Police something something, and it's a committee that reviews complaints brought to the police department. Yeah.
All right, thank you. It looks like Bob is asking what the acronym is. Does anybody here in the
think
Zoom
he was
room
pointing out
know?
what the committee was.
I could tell you if you wanted to, but that might get us very off topic. But the Civilian Police Communications Committee was the one that took complaints from the police department and then sort of monitored them. And the question of how that monitoring took place is, to my mind, an open question a little bit. The Community Safety Review Committee has a very short lifespan up until the end of the year to review policies of the police department and budgetary matters dealing with safety in the community and make recommendations to the select board. The police chief reports to the town manager, and the town manager is hired by the select board. So that's the chain of command, if you will. So I think that's enough for today.
Thank you.
Jess, I had something, if nobody else has a comment. Shay, I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm so glad that you were able to speak to the Community Safety Review Board, which we've been talking a lot about. And it makes me think, when you talk about community safety with regard to mental health, with regard to the Department of Children and Families, with regard to ICE, it makes me think a little bit of a comment that one of the ICE officials in the documentary made that we just saw, where he said something like, no matter if you don't like ICE or you do like ICE, we're still here to protect public safety. And I really noticed that word public, and I wonder, what does public safety mean, right? Because the implication there seems to be public safety meaning citizens. And I bet if you really dug through it, you'd find that public safety means some citizens, right? And so how do we envision in Windham County what public safety means, and for whom, and for what? And what are the limits to it? And what would safe public for everybody look like? I think a lot about, Community Asylum Seekers Project works with now. Sorry, Shay, go ahead.
My internet's too slow. I said those largely are many of the central questions of our work, right? Is when people think about public safety, who counts as the community that is quote unquote held safe by different systems or not. And a lot of our work is just listening to anyone who wants to share the most impacted people, centered, hopefully, about what are the impacts of these systems that purport to hold us safe. Do people feel like they're keeping everyone safe? If not, what could we envision that would even feel like a safe place for everyone? And trying to put that visionary thinking to the select board.
Yeah, like where are they keeping us safe from each other? You know, I mean, so much of law that has to do with protecting citizens, it sort of circumscribes who is the proper beneficiary of that law and who is the understood as a threat, always already previously constructed as a threat, right?
Yes. From each other and ourselves, I think,
Right.
as well. There's lots there.
Yep. Yeah. And so we serve 8 asylum seekers right now, some of whom have open asylum cases and some of whom don't, you know, and all of these folks are at risk if they get pulled over. And it just makes me like, who is our community for, you know? But I'll turn it over to the next person to answer those questions.
Steve, do you have a question?
Yeah, Steve Crofter here. Just wondering, for those of us who live in Windham County but not in the Brattleboro area, are there, if we wanted to kind of coordinate some kind of campaign here in Bellows Falls, for example, here in Rockingham, is there, how might we go about that? I mean, obviously as individuals we can do something, but is there some effort to coordinate things in farther reaches of Windham County?
I can speak to that a little. We don't have a bunch of folks from Windham County in the organizing pool right now. Like I said, we decided to prioritize the sheriff and Brattleboro because we have some Brattleboro folks. I love the idea of organizing in Bellows Falls around this. As everybody will find out, we meet currently every 3 Sundays. Our next meeting is this upcoming Sunday, actually. And, we have those 2 focuses right now. It would be great to hear more about what the Bellows Falls Police Department is all about. I think in the very, I don't know. And in the very beginning, there was, I think, a touch of scoffing about it. Like, yeah, they'll never go for that. And I have no idea what that means. Somebody's perspective on the department and their pliability. But we didn't have folks from Bellows Falls there, and so we couldn't really find out. And so eventually turning there, yeah. I mean, right now, folks who live all over the county are helping focus on the sheriff. And, and Brattleboro's another thing going. But I say that, the way to do it is to, hop in on the calls and, and reach out to other folks in Bellows Falls about it, see if they're interested. But if you join up with the campaign, if you contact us, I can send you a bunch of stuff, like, about what all this entails and exactly what the policies are and stuff. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I guess the short answer is hop on in and hook up.
Great, thanks.
Check.
Mark, if people want to come to the meeting on Sunday, how do they access that meeting?
Hopefully the follow-up to this will be going out tomorrow, and the information will be in there. If people want to get a jump start on it, I can put the email that we're using. But yeah, look out for the follow-up tomorrow. If you got the Zoom link, you will be getting the follow-up. That sfagit@gmail is who to hit up. Just to say I want to find out more. Check.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And they're fun calls. They're just not an everyday Zoom call. They're like a fun Zoom call. So encourage you to come.
Ellen, did you want to follow up on Bellows Falls Police Department?
It was just a comment. I'm on the No Mas Polimigra committee, and I think when we talked about Bellows Falls, there had been a lot of upheaval both in that police department and the town government, and I think part of, as well as not having anyone from Bellows Falls in the call, it was just like a little unclear how to even deal with a department that was in all that upheaval. But I believe they recently appointed the person who had been the acting police chief is now the actual police chief. And I think maybe some of the town government stuff has settled down, so it might be a good time to be expanding and trying to organize in Bellows Falls as well as Brattleboro and the towns that are served by the sheriff. And it's super exciting that the Addison County Sheriff Department passed it, because every new department that passes it is something we can build on in reaching out down here in Windham County. Oh, and there's a comment from someone actually in Rockingham. I don't actually live in Bellows Falls, so I was sort of speaking a little out of turn.
Susan Brace, do you want to tell us about Rockingham?
Well, we have a lot of problems with our town government. So we need to get all new people in the select board before we could do anything. I think Steve and Laurel might agree with me. It's a pretty dysfunctional town governance. Plus, it's only a 1 square mile police jurisdiction. So I think concentrating on Windham County Sheriff's Department would be more strategic.
Maybe we just put up signs on the entrances to that 1 mile square radius, warning folks.
All right. What else is on your mind, everybody? Yes, and we are recording this, so we'll be able to share it off with the people who are not here this evening.
I will, we can include the recording in the follow-up email, and folks can forward it at will.
Great.
You're welcome.
Mark?
Hi, I just wanted to pipe in, we were talking earlier about those two US code things about not cooperating, about not doing any kind of sanctuary policy or getting punished. I know at least one of those, like those aren't new. The Trump administration didn't make those up. Those have been on the books. I have a bad memory for details, but I think for quite some time. And as I am, what I hear, some of the towns waging this campaign have gotten blowback from the police department about those things, saying, well, if we implement these, we're going to lose certain kinds of funding. And the fact that there was, it's just that this administration has been enforcing them aggressively, right? And so I'm just saying, with the current results, barring a coup, one half of me is like, oh, nice. So maybe the enforcement of that will relax and we'll have an easier time talking to these police authorities. And that won't be such a threat hanging over them. But then I remember that the last time this guy, when he was vice president, not that vice presidents really do much power-wise, except kind of sit around waiting for somebody to die. But that administration had an aggressive deportation program, and, I'm in love with the memory of that administration in a lot of ways. However, on this front, it was horrendous. So I'm not sure how much this election actually helps us out in anti-deportation work. We got this middle of the road dude wanting to please everybody and wanting to work on comprehensive immigration reform. And I have a lot of fear as to, what middle of the road means in this country when somebody's trying to come up with middle of the road for immigration policies, considering at least the sentiments on one side of that road. I just want to express that trepidation. I guess we'll find out. Check.
Yeah, that's something that has been coming up a lot in various spaces is sort of like, what can the immigrant advocacy community expect from a Biden administration? You know, I mean, and it makes me think of, in the clip that we watched, they said, you know, in the previous administration, we didn't necessarily have the same orders, but we were doing the same thing. You know, so I don't think there's any reason to expect. I personally think there's reason to expect that it gets worse because folks relax.
Right.
You know, because we think it's going to get better, and so we sit down and trust the government. And in this case, it's not the thing to do.
And I'm glad we're all here this evening to harness our powers together and continue forth. Keep the pressure on, right? So Ellen has something to add to what Mark is saying. Do you want to add
I just put it in the chat. I think you could go on to Laurel.
Okay, Laurel.
All right, in the video clip, I don't remember the man's name, the ICE representative said, if you have a sheriff who's going to be non-cooperative, we're going to come in and really slam your community. And I just wonder, in the places in Vermont where this is the enhanced policies have been in effect, have we seen that kind of a more aggressive ICE reaction to the county moving in that direction?
Yeah, great question. Because I flagged that part of the series as well. The short answer is no, and Sharon's chatting from her experience in Norwich, no as well. And nationally, the answer is no. The Trump administration did engineer, for propagandistic purposes, a couple sort of high-profile community raids in what they deem sanctuary cities. But the numbers tell a very different story. And in Trump's last 4 years, his administration, as aggressive and despicable as they were with immigration, they only succeeded in deporting about half of the number of people that Obama deported in his first term. And I think that's a shocking statistic to many people. But the primary reason for that was because of the success of these campaigns nationally in removing and limiting local law enforcement from its role as a force multiplier in the policy of mass deportation. Because under Obama, every police department, every prison and jail in the country was being deputized as this runway into the machinery of mass deportation. And the immigrant rights movement had a lot of successes in limiting those linkages and in stopping that collaboration, both nationally and here in Vermont. And so when you look at the numbers in aggregate, by denying that tool to ICE in their quest to deport as many people as possible, they can't make that up through other means. And so it's one of the most effective things that we can do to oppose deportations in our communities is by organizing locally to keep our cops out of the business of deportation and to make sure that law enforcement acting at the behest of state, local, county governments aren't going to be turning people over to ICE. And despite all of our work, it continues to happen in Vermont. Many of you will have heard the name Durby Martinez. Durby was a member of Migrant Justice, a farm worker who was deported earlier this year and died from COVID shortly after being deported to Mexico. What some people don't know is that Durby was only deported because they were turned over to ICE by the Vermont State Police. And we just received, after a 9-month wait, which is illegal, by the way, the records of the night of Durby's detention from the Vermont State Police. They had been holding on to these for the better course of the year, and they just released them to us, where we see that the state trooper who detained Derby sent 2 emails to Border Patrol that night, providing information that allowed them to deport Derby. So that's a police officer being paid by the
It's frozen.
and that sort of horrific and tragic end is not unique, but those numbers are multiplied by the thousands when we look at the role that local police can have in this machinery of mass deportation.
I did not know that. Thanks for sharing that, Will. I think I have a question, and it's really sort of action steps related. Like, what do we do? How can we harness our energies productively? Ellen, I see you nodding your head. Do you have some ideas?
Yeah, I'm not sure if was somebody on the agenda going to talk about that. So if so, I was just nodding like, yeah, it's a good time to talk about it, but I don't need to be the person doing that.
I think, Ellen, you are the one who is planning the most intervention with, is it that there's something going on in December that you've been working on, right? Maybe talk about that a little bit.
Well, what I could talk about, that has to do with Shay's committee, but what I was mostly thinking about is whether we want to let people know how to get involved with the local crew that is organizing around this, because that's what's going to happen like after this meeting. So we do have like a crew that's been meeting every 3rd Sunday, and I thought we might like let people know how to get involved with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Mark had put in the chat his email address if folks wanted to subscribe to that list. But if people want to just put their email addresses in the chat right now, I can collect them and we'll put you on the list right away. And that's a good space. That's 3 days from now. It's a good time to talk about next steps. So feel free to do that, folks, if you want to be added to our list. And there's no obligation to show up to meetings. You just would get put on the listserv.
Also, if people want to reserve that time, we meet at 5 o'clock when we do meet. So this Sunday we'll be meeting at 5 o'clock. If you need to reserve that time or contemplate that time.
Or if somebody wants to come watch my kids so they're not always on the call.
I should also say that in our approach to the sheriff right now, the sheriff is like appointed, not elected, this particular one, and he's got like a couple years before the next election. So apparently he's, walking on political eggshells or whatever, kind of fearful of doing bold actions. But anyway, we don't care, but that's the case. And he's currently assembling a bit of a cover for himself in the form of a task force to recommend things, and it's got some pretty groovy people coming onto it, from what Ann is reporting to us, and they're going to manifest any day now. It's been any day now for about a month, but anyway, and when they do, we have a presentation ready to go that we're going to go and give that task force to see if they will officially recommend. Now, importantly, we're not letting the campaign be redirected into that task force, as in, our demands, so to speak, are directly to the sheriff. We are going to go to the task force as a mechanism, but we're not going to divert the whole campaign so we get stuck there if they get stuck on the issue. So that's the current plan with the sheriff. And in Brattleboro right now, we're talking to the committee that Shay's helping facilitate. They're assembling a package of proposals. We're also, importantly we're not trying to make that committee responsible for all police reform in Brattleboro. There are some trying to be like, this committee's got to handle it and the police won't do anything and the select board won't do anything. And they've been sort of scapegoating this committee, which is very, very wrong. But we're you know, we've talked to them and we're going to continue talking to them, and, you know, and that may make it into their final report. It may not. And also that when we're pursuing these campaigns, there is going directly to the police authorities themselves to see if they will change their policies. But there's also all political mechanisms of government. There's a select board, representative town meeting, there's ordinances, ballot measures and stuff. We recently concluded that there are not enough people in the central organizing group right now to, and geographically spread around the county to start going for ordinances before the select board when you need a lot of outreach, a lot of signatures. COVID-19 has really suppressed any kind of democracy that requires in-person signatures. The state has just this week decided they will not allow electronic signatures to replace in-person signatures, so that suppression of democracy is now intentional as well as circumstantial. Anyhow, so there's committees that happen to be involved with our two targets right now. But other than that, it's directly to the police authorities themselves to see if they will do it without being forced to. Check.
Carol has a clarification question, and it,
Go ahead.
yeah.
Just to say, Will responded to that in the chat, just to bump that a little bit too.
Oh, he did. Oh, great. Okay, so Carol, your question's answered. I just didn't want to lose it. Great, thanks, Will. All right. Well, I think
That's
that.
just a question, though. I mean, it's like Carol was asking, would the state police be beholden to these local loophole closures? And Will's answer was no, right? That stadies could still come through and do basically what they were going to do anyway. So even these measures are, I mean, as all sort of measures to reform the police are limited, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for raising that, Carol. That's a good question.
Kate, I'm wondering if you would like to talk quickly before we wrap up in just a couple of minutes about how people can get involved in CASP.
Yeah, sure. So Community Asylum Seekers Project, many of you may know about. It was founded by Steve Crofter. Steve, you want to wave? There's Steve. In 2016. And we support people who have open asylum cases in the United States to settle in Vermont and have their basic needs met and provide a supportive community. Providing a supportive community means multiple things. It means sort of doing community education around asylum and trying to make the community at large more supportive. It also means that we have a network of some 200 volunteers who step up to do simple daily tasks like helping people get groceries, helping people get to the doctor, helping people do language learning or job placement. And it's a well-coordinated volunteer network. If anybody is interested in being on a list in that regard, please check out our website, which Susan, our treasurer, has posted in the chat. It's caspvt.org, caspvermont.org, or you can find us on Facebook. And supporting asylum seekers in Windham County is one way to make our community more open and welcoming. And I think that these police reform efforts are another very important and deeply integrated way to do that.
Great. Well, does anybody have any final thoughts or words of inspiration or wisdom to leave us with this evening?
I have something highly technical. There's a lot of information in the chat right now, and at the bottom where you type stuff, there's right next to the thing that says file, there's a hardly visible 3 dots. If you click that, a menu comes up, and up top it says Save Chat. You press that and go into your Documents folder afterwards, and you'll see something called Zoom, and the chat will be in there with all this information that's been posted.
That's great. I've also been screenshotting it as we've been going, Mark, so that we can send stuff out in our follow-up. Okay. So that's a very cool Zoom trick that I did not know.
Yeah.
Great.
I've just saved it.
Awesome. And it looks like Shay posted also the surveys in there too. So you'll be able to get access to those and complete those if you live in the Brattleboro and Greater Brattleboro area. Wonderful.
Anne, did you want to say something inspirational from Canada? Are you just promising to say something inspirational once you get there?
I need to take this off. Anyhow, I just read this and I thought it was so great that Justin Trudeau was meeting refugees when they arrive at an airport with warm coats. Now, what's wrong with our country?
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks to everybody for coming and taking an hour and a half out of whatever day this is, a Thursday night. We appreciate it, especially to Will and muchísimas gracias de nuevo, Olga, for joining us. That was really wonderful to hear your perspectives, and you all are doing such incredible work, and we really like all that work and follow it closely and appreciate it. So we will send a follow-up email probably tomorrow with some links and information about how you can get more deeply involved in this campaign. And you're very welcome. Thanks so much for coming.
Great. See you all next time. I'm going to stop recording now.